You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go a little bit further afield, beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your Apples, your VIX, your Tesla, your SPY, your Ford options, and see what's going on in the crypto waters. Are they stormy? Are they frothy? Yeah, a little bit these days. So it's a lot of fun to break down. We're going to talk the volatility, the SKEW, the OI changes, the size positions, what's going on out there, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever compelling, ever scintillating, at least we tend to think so. We may be biased, but we tend to like it. Judging by the numbers, seems like a lot of you folks tend to agree with us. Options Insider Radio Network. Remember, if you're just listening to crypto, first off, you're missing out on a whole bunch of other content. So wherever you're getting this show, make sure you do upgrade to the full network feed. That'll get you all of our content out there, listeners. Then, of course, you want to go above and beyond. You want to join us for additional exclusive content. Let's say pro Q&As. You probably have questions about the world of options and derivatives, including crypto. We have a lot of guests rotating through on the crypto front. We said Greg Magadini coming in on the pro Q&A sessions there, as well as, of course, Options Oddities every Friday, where we break down the crazy week that was and indeed still is on the old unusual activity front, as well as live access to this and every other show we do throughout the week, as well as great giveaways we just gave away on our last show. We just gave away the Pro Trading Crate for the month of October. You didn't win. Maybe you didn't have a chance to win because you weren't in the Pro. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go. These are really cool. We put these together for our Pro members. They are no small amount of effort and expense, but we like you folks. I think you guys deserve some fun giveaways. And so check it out, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, or for you cool kids, /secret club is the place to go to join us on our journey to the dark side as we continue our journey right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Yep, we're talking about the big dog, which is Bitcoin. Once again, a little bit smaller this week than it was last week, but also, interestingly enough, a topic we talked about with Mr. Bill, our guest on the show last week. A lot of people have been pointing this out in the crypto space. For a long time, the narrative has been, it's just high beta tech allocation. Wherever the market goes, Bitcoin goes and then some. But these days, it seems like it's withdrawing from that a little bit out there. It's still correlated, but not quite as aggressively correlated as it was with the equity markets out there. We've seen equity markets selling off pretty hard and crypto doing a little bit, but kind of doing its own thing. Some days it's rallying and crypto also doing its own thing. And that's kind of the case out there again today. We're seeing pretty aggressive downturns in the broad equity markets, and crypto is turning down, but it's not exactly falling out of bed the way perhaps some folks might have worried about, given all the madness out there. So intriguing times we find ourselves out there in the crypto space. Of course, if you folks want to run these numbers for yourselves, see what the heck we're talking about out there in the world of crypto, there's only one place to go: Genesis Volatility, aka gvol.io, aka the place with so much edge you'll cut yourself in the world of crypto options analytics. Go over there, tell them we sent you. gvol.io. You can run all these numbers for yourselves. All the vol, all the analytic breakdowns we're going to do on the show today, coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. And if you ran the numbers right now, you'd see Bitcoin a little bit lower than it was this time last week, almost exactly 300 handles below. We were 19,585 on the show last week, 19,283 this week. So again, 300 handles in the annals of Bitcoin moves, not a heck of a lot. So probably why we're seeing what we're seeing in the vol space. Before we get to the vol, let's run the numbers for the entire week. If you expand the frame of reference beyond just this show to show and move out throughout the entirety of the week, a little bit broader range out there. The high was actually north of 20,000, 20,372. That was last Wednesday. Remember, beginning of the week last week, listeners, we saw huge rallies out there in the broad equity space, and that tended to lift everything along with it, including Bitcoin, even though not quite as aggressively as we saw out there in the broad equity space. And then the sell-off, the low was actually today, earlier this morning, 19,139. So we have bounced about 150 handles off that low, threatening to break the 19,000 level. Be interesting to see if we do break that 19,000 level later today. If we re-rack these vol numbers, probably be a little bit of a different story. When we start breaking those psychological levels, that usually does seem to kick the vol into a little bit higher gear. Right now, what we're seeing is vol pretty much hanging out at about almost exactly the same level as it was this time last week. The Bitcoin average at the money vol, remember, they take a bit of a sampling of what's going on across a term structure and break it down into one number that tries to encapsulate that. It's about a 63.5 right now. It was about 63.7 last week, so almost literally unched on the week. Pretty much a rounding error. The same thing with Simon's BitVol. It's one of the few analytics we're going to talk about on the show today you can't find over there at Genesis Volatility. Head on over to Simon's site, t3index.com, for all of his analytics he pumps out there. That one hanging out pretty close to unched as well. It was a 70 on the show last week, 69 this week, so coming in a whopping 1 point. SKEW-wise, things looking a little bit more negative this week. We're negative 4.4 this week, negative 3.6 last week. Remember, the more negative it is, that means the more pronounced the volatility is in the put wing, aka the options that are below the at the money strike. There's more vol there. It usually means there's more interest and or concern to the downside than there is to the upside. So negative 4.4. Historically, going back throughout the early days of crypto, the bid has always been to the upside. The premium's always been to the calls. People are always bullish on crypto. These days, given the sell-offs we're seeing out there, we've been hanging out in the negative zone for the better part of the last few months, and we remain there again this week. Simon's BitSkew kind of shown something similar as well. Not a huge evolution out there as well. It was a 99 this week, 100.4 last week, so down 1.4 points, but otherwise hanging out at pretty much the same level. You know what else is hanging out at about the same level is the open interest out there on Deribit. Not a huge evolution after we saw September go off the board recently and take a whole bunch of OI with it. There hasn't been a ton to come in to replace it. There's 154,000 calls open on Deribit right now. It's up a whopping 6,000 from this time last week. And there's 78,000 puts. That's down 1,000. So really not a heck of a lot of evolution in the OI. Still hanging out close to that 2-to-1 level calls over puts in the OI right now. And in terms of the size positions, what are the size positions in Bitcoin options right now? Let's find out. Let's start at the bottom of our top five. Number 5, the 30,000 strike. That has 10,200 contracts open. That is a newcomer to our top 5 this week. So interesting to see a little bit of an evolution going on out there in the top positions as we're seeing months roll off the board and really kind of change things up out there. Number 4, we have the 40,000 strike. So 30,000 to 40,000. Interesting little jump. That has 10,900 contracts open. That's also a newcomer to the top 5. So intriguing stuff out there. Number 3, we're jumping back down to the 19,000 strike. That's pretty much our at-the-money strike right now, listeners. That has 11,800. That's down 400. It's also interesting to see at-the-money strikes starting to resonate more out there in the world of crypto options. For the longest time, it didn't matter where we were trading. It seemed like the options that were 20, 30, 50% out of the money were always dominating the open interest. It seems like towards the end of December expiration, what really took a lot of that extreme paper with it. And we have really yet to replace a lot of it. So interesting to see a lot of you starting to come in and play around the, dare I say it, the more relevant strikes of 19,000. Interesting to see. 11,800 contracts open there. It's actually down 400 from this time last week. The number 2 spot, we have the 25,000 strike. That used to be our number 1. That was number 1 for quite some time. That fell off when September rolled off the board. Now it is down to number 2, but it is making a bit of a resurgence this week. It's got 12,200 contracts open. That's up 2,100 contracts from this time last week. So some folks starting to pile back into the 25,000 strike. And the number 1 size position in Bitcoin options right now, the 20,000 strike, that has 13,200 contracts open. That's actually down 300 from this time last week. So we'll see. If the 25,000 strike can continue what it did this week, it'll be back in the number 1 spot. Again, interesting stuff out there. In terms of action, the busiest day since our last show was on the 4th. That was actually the day right after our last show last week. That was last Tuesday, listeners. And we saw about 38,400 contracts going up. That's a decent amount. Actually ties on September 9th. We saw the exact same amount of volume going up back then. So a decent amount, but nothing earth-shaking. We saw more than that the week before, 44,500 going up. So decent numbers, but not blowing the doors. Of course, if you go back to, let's say, the dog days of summer into the mid to late summer period, you saw 14,000 contracts going up back then. So it's a lot more than that, but not exactly a record week out here. But again, hefty week nonetheless. In terms of CME contract, what's going on out there in the big dog CME options? Again, this is another one where if you want to find this content, head on over to our friends over there at Bantix, bantix.com, bantix.com. Then go head on there, click on the free trial, or just go to cmegroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO. That's the name of our Thursday show, This Week in Futures Options. And it's also where they generate great free reports for you folks. And you get all in there. You can look at all the other stuff. Of course, you're welcome to check out ag options and metals options, anything else that floats your boat that trades over there at CME. But I think for a lot of listeners of this show, you're going to choose the cryptocurrency drop down. And then from there, you're going to see the big CME Bitcoin options not doing a heck of a lot. Only 4 contracts have gone up so far this week. A decent week last week, almost 700 on the tape. I guess not a lot for most products, but for CME Bitcoin options, it's a decent clip. The micro, though, the micros were, I thought there'd be a little bit more action out there. The micro, of course, the more bite-sized contracts, they're aimed specifically at the retail audience out there. So far today, 20 had traded as of the kickoff of the show. And we saw last week a whopping 282 going up. So for whatever reason, the micro are not lighting the world on fire. Let's see what's going up out there in BITO land. You folks are asking about BITO. We're starting to incorporate it into the show more. We know for a lot of you out there, that's pretty much your go-to in terms of getting exposure and certainly options trading action in the world of crypto, because for a number of reasons, Deribit, the one we talk about on the show mostly, is inaccessible to most of our U.S. audience. And also, this doesn't require a separate account. You could trade options on BITO in your standard, whatever you have, TD or whatever firm you're trading options with, you could trade BITO in that. So that makes it attractive, I know, for a lot of you out there. Let's get some updated numbers right now. BITO hanging out at $11.79, off 17 cents today, and it's down pretty much about, I'd say about close to that level for the week. It was a little bit north of 12, I think, on our show last week, so off about 20 odd cents on the week, which of course is looking decent for my 1x2 put spread. We'll get to that in a little bit. Let's first break down in terms of action out there. Pretty decent day, 64,000 contracts on the tape today. The ADV hanging out at 80,000. That's a pretty impressive number. There aren't a lot of options out there that put up 80,000 contracts a day. So you're getting into pretty rarefied air. It's not top 10 status. And we break down those numbers usually a couple of times a week on our option block program. And we've yet to have BITO really break into the top 10 there. Usually it's going to require at least somewhere in the ballpark of close to 200,000 contracts in a given day to see something hit the top 10. Maybe you can make it on a light day with a $1.50, a $1.60. But 64,000 is not going to do it. But still, it's a pretty impressive number nonetheless. Let's do some quick top positions. By the way, the BITO vol, 70%. It's actually up a little bit, up about 2% from what it was this time last week. So bucking the trend, but hanging out pretty close to the number we were seeing out there in terms of the Deribit vol as well. It's hanging out in the mid to high 60s as well. In terms of the top positions in BITO right now, let's do a quick top 5 out here in BITO options. Number 5, we have 12,000 of the October 12 puts. Number 4, we have 12,000 as well, 12,800 of the October 10 puts. Number 3, out to December, 28,000 of the D10 puts. A lot of people like the 10 strike there. Number 2, the 28,500 of the D15 calls. And rounding out the top 5 in BITO this week, 38,000 of the December 10 puts. You folks trading out there in BITO right now? Hit us up, let us know. Right now in BITO options, interestingly enough, it's kind of the opposite of what we're seeing in Deribit. Deribit calls are still outnumbering puts. We mentioned it. It's pretty much almost 2-to-1. Versus in BITO OI, it's about 382,000 puts open versus 300,000 calls. So BITO being a little bit more recent addition to the game, obviously. So that probably skews it a little bit, pun intended. But interesting to see so many folks playing the puts. That's certainly where I was lining up. I mentioned on the show last week, I did a 1x2 put spread, buying 1, selling 2. It was expiring in the weeklies out there, expiring coming up this week, I do believe, in the BITO options, buying the 12 put, selling 2 of the 11 half puts. What you're looking for in that kind of spread is for the underlying, in this case, BITO, to drift down to the 11 half strike and then hang out there right around expiration. Of course, the reason you do that versus just selling the 11 half puts themselves, which also was attractive, is first off, the put skew, as you mentioned on the show, is getting a little bit more aggressive. So those puts are starting to reflect higher valuation levels, higher volatility levels. That makes selling them more attractive. And so you could certainly sell the 11 half puts. I thought about doing that. I don't mind getting into BITO, but I wanted a little bit more cushion. I thought we might be seeing a little bit more downtrend out there. That's certainly what we're seeing this week. So I wanted a little bit more cushion in case we broke through that 11 half strike, got down to close to the BITO 52-week low, which is somewhere around 11.37. So buying that 1x2 put spread gives me pretty much a cushion all the way down to pretty much close to the 11 handle down there, which is attractive. And so I like that a little bit better. Also, the fact that the puts are so juicy right now, I was able to buy 1 and sell 2 and get that for a credit. They paid me to buy the 12 puts. So that's always attractive. So you could do that for almost around half of what you could get for just selling the 11 half puts straight up. So in that scenario, I liked having a little bit more cushion. You're giving up some of the premium, obviously, but you're getting a little bit more cushion. And obviously, if it drops down a little bit, the where it's hanging out right now, it's actually looking pretty good for that spread. So you have a lot more runway to play with, a little bit more cushion, and you're still getting a credit to do it. So it's an attractive trade. That's why I did that out there. But I'm curious what you folks are up to out there in BITO. Clearly, a lot of you are playing in the puts. Are you just selling puts, looking to get long BITO? If you're doing that, I can't really fault you either. There is some juice out there. As long as you're picking levels, you don't mind picking up the underlying. And we've talked about the level of tracking that BITO does in the past, not just on this program, but on our advisors option program and other shows. And it's done a surprisingly decent job. Usually a product like this that's predicated off futures and futures rolling, that roll yield usually kills it. Products like VXX and others, just look at their history. You could see how quickly they get annihilated by negative roll yield. And what we're seeing in BITO is that's not really the case. And so that has made it a little bit more resilient. It tracks better, doesn't lose its value as much over time. So it makes it a little bit more intriguing. So I'm curious for you folks out there. Have you been trading BITO? Hit us up. Let us know as we keep on rolling right on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's dive on into the altcoin universe, the portion of the show we break down everything going on in the rest of the crypto market outside of Bitcoin, except for right now, where we break down the top 10. Kind of hard to escape Bitcoin in that conversation, listeners. It cost you a little over $8 billion still to break into the top 10 right now, down slightly on the week, but not a huge evolution. That's still our friend Dogecoin, managing to cling to its death grip the top 10 again this week. Number 9, Solana, 11.6 billion. So you're jumping up about 3.6 billion there from 10 to 9. Number 8, Cardano, 14.2 billion. Another little jump there. Number 7, Binance Coin, 21.6. That's getting a little bit larger jump. And then our old friend XRP hanging out at number 6 this week, 26.3 billion. Then we jump up quite a bit from 6 to 5. BNB, 44.3 billion. Number 4, USD Coin, 46 billion, pretty much exactly. Number 3, Tether, 68.3 billion. Numero due, we've got ETH, 160 billion. And the number 1 spot out there this week, Bitcoin, $370 billion worth of market cap. Let's get on out to the number 2 out there. Number 1 in a lot of your hearts, that is ETH, managing to stubbornly stay north of the 1,300 level this week, listeners. Coming into showtime, it was at a 1308.5. That's down from 1322 on our last show. So it's down about 13.5 handles net show on show. Not a huge move when it comes to ETH. It flirted with, just this morning, it flirted with the 1,300 level. Got to 1,300 and pretty much a quarter before it turned around a little bit. The high came last Wednesday, 1378. So in terms of ETH, that's actually a pretty muted range, about 78 handles. That's not much at all for ETH, which is why we're seeing the vol continue to erode. It was 81.5 on our last show, 76.6 on this show. Still frothy, still obviously elevated when compared to Bitcoin, but off the highs we saw not too long ago out there in triple digits out there in ETH land. In terms of SKEW, that SKEW is pretty much hanging out around the same level that it was this time last week as well, as ETH continues to do. It was negative 6.8 last week, negative 6 this week. I'm sure if it managed to break that 1,300 level, we might see a little bit more negative SKEW percolating in there, but the fact that it held it today means our SKEW is holding on at a negative 6 as well. In terms of OI, we are seeing more OI start to populate out there in ETH after September rolled off the board. So unlike Bitcoin, which is kind of just treading water, we're seeing more paper coming in to ETH, even though it isn't a ton. 3.3 million calls open on Deribit right now. It's up 120,000 from this time last week. So you folks still love your ETH calls. And we have 758,000 puts open on Deribit this week. That's up 39,000. So once again, we are still hanging out pretty much 4-1 calls over puts out there in ETH, which is what makes the negative SKEW so interesting out there. There's so many more calls open, yet our SKEW is still negative, which is intriguing. In terms of size positions, what are the size positions in ETH options right now? Let's find out. Number 5 is the 1,800 strike. That's down 2,000. It's got 137,000 contracts open this week. Number 4, moving up a little bit to the 2,500 strike. That's got 210,000 contracts open. That's up 4,000 from this time last week. Number 3, the 3,500 strike. 288,000 contracts open there. That's down 2,000 from this time last week. Number 2, we have the 4,000 strike. 322,000 contracts open. That's actually unched from this time last week. And the number 1 position still, the 3,000 strike with 417,000 contracts open. That's up about 1,000 from this time last week. So once again, the 3,000 strike maintains its death grip on the ETH options market. Also interesting to note, unlike Bitcoin options, we're not seeing the same, shall we say, relevant strikes dominating the top positions that we do in Bitcoin. We see 3,500s here, 4,000s, 3,000s, 2,500s. The closest we have to the at-the-money strike, which is 1,300, is actually the 1,800 strike. So that is somewhat interesting and surprising. Shows you folks are not really lining up for size yet down around the 1,300 level where we've been hanging out for quite some time. Speaking of volume out there, a decently active week. The big day was actually Friday, 345,000 contracts going up. So again, that's a little bit lighter than we've seen lately out there. We've seen 700 plus thousand not too long ago, 600,000, 400,000 even last week. This week, 345,000. So a little bit lighter week out there in terms of volume. Let's get on out to CME land, see what's going on out there. Remember, they launched the big Ether options on September 12th. So coming up on a month now. Time flies when you're talking crypto options out there. You guys can find these for yourselves, the same place. Just head on out to CME out there, go to the cryptocurrency section, and you will find them. We finally have some reports out here. These are the micro Ether. Let's see if I can find the big. The big Ether have been a little bit more challenging. There we go. We finally have some numbers. They're finally starting to populate through the reports. So we saw 33 contracts going up last week for the big Ether option. Remember, these are 50 ETH, so they're pretty big. And so far this week, we have no contracts going up yet today. So 33 contracts last week. Let's go back a couple of weeks, see if we can see any other numbers out there. Yeah, there wasn't really no data for that either, just launching. So pretty much the first week we have good data for is last week, listeners. 33 contracts on the tape. And in terms of the micro contracts, again, not really seeing the robust uptake there yet. We're seeing 20 on the tape today and a whopping 282 trading last week. So that's a pretty quiet week for micro ETH options. We've seen thousands going up before that. So a weirdly quiet week for all things micro ETH out there on CME. Let's head on out to Solana, see what's going on out there this week. Solana coming into the start of the show, down a little bit as well, as pretty much everything is in the crypto space. It was 33.12 on our last show, 32.43 this week, down a whopping 70 cents from where it was this time last week. Vol-wise, we're seeing the same evolution in Solana options that we saw in ETH and Bitcoin. That means it's all coming in 72.3 this week, 84.4 last week, so down a little over 2 points on the week. SKEW-wise, also hanging out in that negative territory. It was a negative 4.12 last week, so 4.12, and a negative 5 exactly this week. So actually getting a little bit more negative this week. In terms of OI, we are seeing things percolate a bit out there in Solana land. 187,000 contracts open on the call front. It's up 55,000 from this time last week. The puts, 476,000. It's up 66,000. Usually the puts are dramatically outpacing the calls, and they are so this week. But in terms of volume, they both gained about the same number this week, which is kind of interesting. So we're still hanging out at pretty much that 4-to-1 puts over calls, which again is what makes Solana so fascinating. It's a cheaper underlying already by comparison to Bitcoin and ETH. And we have puts dramatically outpacing calls in the OI, which is also kind of fascinating out there. In terms of top positions, number 5, we have the 30 strike. Remember I said we're hanging out at about a 32.5 coming into the start of the show. But the 30 strike is number 5, 51,000 contracts open there. That is a newcomer this week. Number 4, we have the 28 strike. We have a bit of a tie for the number 4/3 spot, actually, listeners. Number 4, we have the 51,000 of the 28 calls open. That's down a whopping 52,000. They got cut pretty much in half this week. And right behind it, we have the 20 strike, also at 51,000 contracts open. That is a newcomer this week. So some big swings in Solana options this week. Number 2, we have the 26 strike. That has 98,000 contracts open. That's up 42,000 from this time last week. And the number 1 size position in Solana options, the 32 strike, pretty much the at-the-money strike right now. 120,000 contracts open. That's up 25,000 from this time last week. So unlike the other two, we are seeing the at-the-money strike being the dominant position out here, which is kind of interesting. Let's get out to the activity. We saw the busiest day actually today. 173,000 contracts on the tape today. That compares to about 237,000 last week. So that was the biggest week we've seen so far. But still a pretty active week, all things considered. Let's get on out some of the other altcoin out here this week. XRP, again, the will they, won't they continues. Even though XRP net up on the week, 52.5 cents. It was 45.7 cents last week, so up about 6.8 cents. So folks continue to seem like they're believing that we're going to see a resolution out there, and that's going to be somewhat favorable to XRP. Doge hanging out at about 6 cents. It was hanging out at 6 cents last week, so not really a huge move there. Litecoin, 53.80 last week, 53.43 this week, down, about 37 cents on the week. Cardano, we were at about a 42.70 last week, 41.5 this week. And then Polkadot, 6.33 last week. It's pretty much on 6.35 this week, so no change there. As well as no change in our old friend, Shiba Inu. As now, before we get out of here, let's get on to some of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody. Welcome to your crypto questions. If you have a question about crypto, hit us up. Questions at theoptionsinsider.com is the place to go. If you're one of our pro members, of course, put it in the live chat or use your members hotline. You get bumped to the top of the list as always. Or, of course, hit us up on social media at Options on most of the major social media outlets there to get your questions into the show. And this week's question, we're revisiting a topic that we first touched on to kick off the year. We asked you folks back back at the beginning of this year, seems like a year ago, back at the beginning of the year, we asked you guys if you had to buy an out-of-the-money option that expired, a 10% out-of-the-money option, I should say, a 10% out-of-the-money option that expired at the end of the year, December 31st, on one of these four different asset classes. Which one would you choose? Gave you four choices: VIX, so volatility itself, Bitcoin, WTI, so crude oil, or the SPX, obviously the S&P 500. And back in January, when the SPX was already at 4,600, well north of where it is right now, over 1,000 points north, 34% of you chose you wanted to buy a 10% out of the money call expiring at the end of the year on the S&P 500. Given the recent performance in the market the last couple of years, it was kind of hard to fault you. You could see where you were coming from. But that was interesting. We thought we would revisit that now and see if you guys still felt that way. So we asked you that same question. Which one of these four would you choose to buy a 10% out of the money call expiring at the end of the year on? Again, same four: VIX, Bitcoin, WTI, and SPX. And let's see how your voting has evolved. It just went live not too long before showtime. Listeners, you folks can make your voice heard. Again, go on over to @options on Twitter. That's the place where our question of the week lives. And right now, we still have a tie between the S&P 500 and crude oil. Both of them hanging out at exactly 39.1%, which is interesting. Behind it, we have Bitcoin. So some folks, there are some Bitcoin bulls still hanging out there, listeners. 13% of you choosing Bitcoin, and no love for volatility, no love for VIX. Only 8.7% of you choosing VIX. You guys have a vote. @options is the place to go to make your voice heard. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this Just the Facts, ma'am, edition of the Crypto Rundown. You guys have a question about what's going on out there in the world of crypto derivatives, or a guest you'd like to see us feature on the show, hit us up. Let us know @options on most social media platforms. questions@theoptions.com. Also works. Remember, if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing on your platform of choice. Really just help new folks discover the content in these crazy times. And of course, if you want more content in your ear holes, including a lot more that touches on crypto, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. Speaking of pro, you folks get your first of multiple pro Q&As popping off tomorrow. Their buddy, actually the creator of the Bantix platform, Mr. Nick Howard. You can come on and ask him all your questions. If you have questions about crypto options, he's a good guy to ask. The setups, all the SKEW, all that good stuff. That'll be tomorrow's Pro Q&A. And of course, if you want to go kick the tires and light the fires on all the analytics we're talking about on the show today for yourselves, you know where to go. GenesisVolatility.com. GVol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fire. So stay safe out there, listeners. We'll see you back here next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.